"Don't make this harder than it is," my father said across the chapel lobby, before our watching relatives. "Your mother and I told you not to come. You abandoned Grandma, and you are not turning her funeral into another performance." My mother stood beside him with my brother, Evan, blocking the doors like I was a stranger. I stood alone, just the folder under my arm and one question they never expected the funeral director to ask. 3 days earlier, their text arrived during my night shift at the county records office. "Don't come to Grandma's funeral. She didn't want you there." I read it repeatedly. My grandmother, Ruth Bennett, had raised me while my parents chased failed businesses. When she became ill, I drove 2 hours every Saturday to buy groceries, organize medications, and keep her company. My parents visited when they needed money. 6 months before her death, Grandma asked me to catalog a cedar chest of deeds, receipts, and letters. Instead, she showed me unpaid tax notices for the farmhouse and bank withdrawals she had never authorized. "Your father says he's borrowing," she whispered, "but he stopped asking." I wanted to confront him. Grandma refused. "Not yet. People reveal more when they think you are quiet." Because I worked with archived property files, I helped her request certified copies of every document tied to the farmhouse. We discovered Dad had submitted a forged authorization to open a home equity line. Mom had signed as witness. Evan had used part of the money to rescue his failing gym. Grandma hired an estate planner, changed her accounts, and gave me a sealed envelope. "Open this only if they try to erase you," she said. After her death, my parents announced Evan would inherit the farmhouse because he had stayed loyal. Then came the funeral text. That felt wrong because Grandma had prepaid everything and named me as her contact. So I called the funeral home. The director, Malcolm Price, sounded surprised. "Your parents said you were unavailable and approved several changes." "I approved nothing." That morning, I arrived 30 minutes before the service. My parents intercepted me, and their accusation pulled relatives from the chapel. Evan smirked. "Grandma finally saw who you really are." Before I answered, Malcolm stepped from his office carrying a clipboard. "Miss Bennett," he said, "I need your approval before we proceed." Dad's face tightened. "Her approval? I'm Ruth's son." Malcolm turned the clipboard around. Grandma's prepaid contract named me as the sole person authorized to change the service, burial location, obituary, or guest restrictions. My parents had asked to remove my name from the obituary and replace Grandma's chosen church burial with a cheaper cemetery plot. The refund, nearly $9,000, would go to Dad. Relatives began whispering. Mom recovered first. Ruth was confused. We were correcting her mistakes. I opened my folder. "Then why did you tell Malcolm I was overseas?" Dad stepped closer. "You're embarrassing your grandmother." "No," I said. "I'm honoring her instructions." I approved the original service and burial. Malcolm then handed me Grandma's final letter, which she had ordered him to deliver if anyone attempted unauthorized changes. Dad demanded privacy. I refused. The letter explained Grandma knew about the forged loan, stolen funds, and my parents planned to blame me if the debt surfaced. She attached statements, the false authorization, and a timeline of every withdrawal. But the strongest evidence was not in the letter. 2 months earlier, Grandma had invited Dad and Evan to the farmhouse kitchen. A security camera, installed after medication disappeared, recorded Dad admitting he used her signature because the house would be ours eventually anyway. Evan complained I might interfere. Mom answered from the doorway, "That's why she cannot be involved in the funeral or the estate." Grandma had preserved the recording with her estate planner. My father's anger collapsed into panic. He claimed Grandma misunderstood. Evan blamed Dad. Mom insisted she only wanted peace. Each excuse contradicted the last. Grandma's will transferred the farmhouse into a trust for a local elder support charity, with me as administrator. Any family member who challenged the trust while involved in financial misconduct lost the rest of their inheritance. Dad had filed a challenge that morning, By sunset, the estate planner notified him his cash bequest was revoked. Evan lost his share too. The forged documents went to the bank's fraud department, and the family later agreed to repay the missing money to avoid a longer civil case. I did not celebrate. After the burial, I stood alone beside Grandma's grave, holding the final note she had written for me. "You were never difficult to love," it said. "They only found your silence convenient." Months later, the farmhouse became temporary housing for seniors facing financial abuse. I kept one thing from the cedar chest: Grandma's brass key. My parents still tell relatives I destroyed the family. Perhaps I destroyed the version, built on silence. But Grandma taught me that dignity is not granted by relatives at a funeral door. Sometimes it begins when you refuse to leave.